It's a regular day in the city of Maputo in Mozambique. I'm in a minibus taxi, a chapa as they're known here, on my way to the border to get my monthly passport stamp. It was probably about a 15-minute ride from the leafy green, sparsely populated, upper-class neighborhood that I was living in at the time to get to the neighborhood that we were currently in right now. A lot less green, a lot more people, matchbox houses, and the smoke emanating from somewhere, like a scrapyard or site of open waste burning. My name is Serati. I am a singer-songwriter, writer, performer, and all-round artist who explores various artistic mediums to question the human condition. Most of my childhood was spent indoors. Growing up in Johannesburg, we moved from house to car, to school to car, to mall to car to house. My childhood was divided between my grandparents' house in Alexandra Township and several other townhouses and apartments that we lived in Johannesburg, as well as stints in Boston, Massachusetts, and London in England. My family, particularly my grandparents, were extremely protective of us. I remember my grandfather waiting for me at the gate where the school transport would drop me home. I would come home from school and be indoors until the next morning when I was again picked up by the transport. My family saw this as a necessity. They wanted to protect us from the violence and drug and alcohol abuse which consumes so many young people in the township. Within all of that, my interaction with nature was limited. It was only later in my life, not so long ago, that upon seeing children playing in nature with such freedom, confidence, and joyful abandon, that I realized how truly unacquainted I was with nature. While as an adult, I developed a deep inner yearning to explore nature, I didn't realize that it was coming from a lack of exposure to it until I entered into a relationship with an avid nature lover who exposed me to the joys and freedom of vast swaths of open spaces, frequent visits to the ocean where he'd hold my hand as I learned to become comfortable body surfing wild waves and exploring dense, untamed bush with all manner of plant and insect life. Wherever there are large bodies of water, there you'll find my heart. Wherever there are large bodies of water, there you'll find my heart. As I interrogated my own feelings of lack of confidence and disconnect and unfamiliarity with nature, it made me question how much of it related to the urban Black experience. And so I started to do research on the topic, and I was amazed to find a wealth of information that backed up my suspicion that my experience as an Black urban-raised person were not unique, and that, in fact, it was tied to our history. The imposition of colonialism and apartheid denied masses of urban Black people access to open green spaces in the following ways. Laws such as the 1913 Land Act and the 1950 Group Areas Act dispossessed masses of Black people from their ancestral lands. Those compelled to the city for work were forced to live in racially segregated areas called townships, which were far removed from plants which held cultural, spiritual, and medicinal relevance to them. According to a paper published in Frontiers Media called The Legacy Effects of Colonial and Apartheid Imprints on Urban Greening in South Africa, Spaces, Species, and Suitability, a national remote sensing survey showed that, on average, white urban households live within 700 meters of a public park, while Black African households are on average 1.7 kilometers away from one. This same paper also cites the inequitable distribution of street trees in South Africa. It references a paper that found that in 3 towns, the affluent suburbs boasted approximately 76% of all street trees, compared to 20% in the CBD and less than 5% in townships and RDP neighborhoods. This despite the larger size of townships and RDP neighborhoods. Now, as someone who has lived in various cities from Johannesburg to Maputo to London, I could see how this was not limited to the South African context. And through the research that I did, I came to realize that this displacement of human beings from nature is a product of colonial ideologies. The ideologies that view humans and nature in a binary. Humans and nature are 2 distinct, separate things. Certain kinds of human beings are superior to nature, namely European white male. And human beings cannot coexist symbiotically with nature. This colonial worldview is reflected within urban planning. How much access human beings have to nature, what are acceptable activities within nature, and who is afforded the privilege of direct access to nature. Have you ever wondered about the links between nature access and human health? And I mean health in the holistic sense, mind, body, and our communities. So I read multiple studies of the effects of nature deprivation and green space in communities, in urban areas. And one of the studies talks about the positive impact of green spaces on crime reduction, and that is attributed to the co-presence of multiple factors. One of them being the opportunities that parks and community gardens provide for interaction among neighborhood members. Interaction in spaces of nature contributes to social cohesion. Number 2, places for exercise. Exercise is known to be a stress reducer, and stress and depression are related. Spaces of nature provide an opportunity for physical activity, which contributes to improved mental health. Finally, the presence of green space reduces the heat island effect. Heat islands are urbanized areas that experience higher temperatures than the areas that surround them due to, amongst other things, a lack of greenery and vegetation. Aggression is proven to increase in higher ambient temperatures up to certain levels. So according to this paper, all of these factors combined may contribute to reduced crime. While another paper published in the National Library of Medicine details the associations between nature exposure and improved cognitive function, brain activity, blood pressure, mental health, physical activity, sleep, and a host of other mental and physical health issues. Forest bathing, or long walks in the forest, have been linked to a reduction in reported feelings of hostility, depression and anxiety, improved immune function, and so much more. This is further compounded by the fact that people living in lower income areas are disproportionately affected by pollution. And this is what I realized that day in the taxi in Maputo, going from that leafy green, upper class suburb, which was full of trees and parks, and passing through that almost industrial, gray looking area, which was so highly populated and where the people there were exposed to all this smoke and pollution. It was this growing sense of awareness that, upon coming back home to South Africa, made me unable to unsee the levels of pollution in the form of smoke by scrapyards that burn the metals that surround Alexandra Township, my township. Not to mention the mine dumps that shadow Soweto all the way across town. Now, when we look at township life against this backdrop, it is easy to see how access to green spaces of nature and biodiversity cannot be a privilege of the individual based on economic status. A common feature of township life is the regular disappearance of young people, either to an untimely, often violent death, or to imprisonment. And then, just like nothing happened, a reappearance from prison back into the same conditions, which compels so many of them into violent and criminal acts in the first place. On a personal level, I vividly remember experiencing a feeling of bondage living at my grandparents' house. Although we were privileged enough to live in a house made up of more than one room, the feeling that you were surrounded at all sides by concrete and metal burglar bars and without the possibility of taking a walk to a nearby park is part of the reason why I now realize that I experienced high-functioning depression. Where am I to go? I don't know, but I must go. Oh, yeah. I posit that the colonial ideologies that have demarcated our cities in ways that do not reflect the interconnectedness of human beings and nature, and which have subjugated and oppressed Black bodies, are the same ideologies that subjugate and oppress the body of the earth. The dual oppressions of human beings deemed of low value and nature are what we need to dismantle if we are to heal the planet and humanity. The values of capitalism, domination, and individualism, which have allowed colonial empires of yesteryear and multinational corporations of today to extract, drill, plunder, and mine the earth as though it were a dead resource, need to make way for African traditional and indigenous values of care, communalism, Ubuntu, and interconnectedness with nature. The concept of Ubuntu does not just refer to human interaction, but the interactions between humans and nature. This is based on the understanding that one cannot exist without the other, that our health, sustenance, and well-being is dependent on the health, sustenance, and well-being of the earth. These are knowledge systems that I believe we need to centralize to bring about harmony between humans and nature, and ultimately to reverse the effects of climate change. And I would like to propose 2 ways that we can do this. A decolonized education that centers traditional and indigenous knowledge systems. All indigenous peoples, to my knowledge, have had a relationship with nature that was based on recognizing the personhood, the sentience of nature. They did not see themselves as separate from nature or dominators or conquerors of nature. They saw themselves as integral to nature. Through a decolonized education system, vital African traditional and indigenous knowledge systems on how to care for the environment, how to coexist with the earth, and how to be a steward of the land can be instilled with contemporary meaning and taught in schools and universities. And I would like to leave you with a story that frames my second proposition. Journey with me about 3 months ago. Location, a semi-rural, semi-urban neighborhood in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, where daily life is permeated intermittently by the sounds of the call to prayer and local pop songs from the nightclub down the road. It's sandy streets and vegetation, and my host has a rainwater tank, and we use the water for various daily household things. The simple act of witnessing the rain and then appreciating a full tank of water allowed me to develop an appreciation for my ability to receive my nourishment straight from the skies, and to view nature as a resource, a precious resource, not to be wasted or taken for granted. While much of the changes to the distribution of spaces of nature require communal effort, mass transformation begins with individual transformation of consciousness, which is why we're all here, right? And which is why I encourage us all to reimagine the ways that we relate to nature and think about, how we connect with nature. I think if we were to begin to see the earth body as an extension of our physical bodies, if we were to begin to see nature as a benevolent source of our sustenance, I think we would begin to heal many of the mental, physical, and social diseases that we experience and begin to restore balance in terms of the quality of our air and our oceans and our planet as a whole. Thank you.